Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, the channel where we are making a computer role-playing game using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. Last video I showed you an example of an error, a bug, and in this video I would like to give some general advice to make debugging easier. This is 10 different bits of advice, and they are not in any particular order. Number one, put comments when you're programming. This makes it easy to tell what each part of the code is supposed to do. Number two, don't add too much code before you test. In other words, test frequently, because that way, every time you test, the amount of new code will be smaller. And if the error is new, then the new code is probably where the bug is. And the less new code there is, the easier it's going to be in general to track down the error. Number three, test multiple times, not just once. The program might not generate an error while still having a bug, because the error might only happen in particular circumstances, right? It might only happen if there's a dice roll. The error might only happen if you roll above 7 or something like that. The error might only happen with a particular string in the description of the monsters, for example. So the first time you run it and everything seems to work, make it work at least a few more times before you move on. Number four, and this is similar to the previous one, when you're testing, make different choices. So, for example, if you are testing the game and there are multiple races and you choose an elf and it works fine, next time choose a dwarf, right? And if last time you made your character a magician, this time make them a warrior, for example, because it might be that the error only happens when you have an elf, only happens when you have a wizard, it only happens in parlaying with monsters and doesn't happen in combat with monsters, for example. So if you think the error might happen, if you don't know when the error is going to happen, test making different choices. Of course, sometimes you'll know that you're getting an error specifically when you fight the monsters. And so, of course, in that case, you would always choose to fight the monsters if that's what's generating the error. But if you're not sure what the scope of the error is, test making different choices. Number five, always have at least one backup of your code before you start changing anything, because you might stuff everything up and it might be easier to just start again from where you were, and you'll need a backup. I mean, it's a good practice to have a backup anyway, because files can get corrupted or accidentally deleted or whatever. But it's also good for in case your attempt to fix things makes things worse, and you find that you're going down the wrong path, and it would be easier to just rewind everything to where it was before you started. Number six, remember that the Twine Games subreddit is there. I always put a link to that at the bottom of these videos. They get coding questions all the time, and from what I've seen, they're usually able to answer what the problem is. So don't be embarrassed or worried that they're gonna. There are some subreddits that are not very nice, but the Twine Game subreddit is fairly good. They will certainly, if you've got a coding problem, they're quite happy to answer that coding problem. Number seven, Googling the error message, if you get an error message, because sometimes, of course, you're debugging without an error message because the program still runs, but it doesn't do what you want it to do. But if there is an error message, Googling the exact text of the error message will usually give you some explanation of what's happening. Although the explanation might be too technical for you, but often it's helpful. I actually find that Googling the error message and then adding Reddit is quite useful because that will tend to give you results from Reddit, of course, and they tend to be pretty good and they tend to be helpful for a non-expert or a non-technical person, because often on Reddit it is people that are just starting out and they're having problems, and that's where the answer comes from. So, don't be afraid to Google. Number 8, read your code carefully rather than skimming over it because you think you know what it does. It's a different sort of way of thinking that you have to get into when you're looking at code. It's sort of the difference between reading a novel for fun and reading a novel looking for typos. If you're reading a novel for fun, you might skim over the typos because you know what the word's meant to be, and it's only a little error, and you can sort of your brain just sort of fills it in. And of course, you want to get out of that mode because you're looking for all these errors. You want all these little errors to trip you up because that's exactly what you're looking for. Well, probably, sometimes it can be a sort of error of logic that the instructions that you've given the computer don't do what you think they do. But often, and perhaps even more often than not, it's just you've put a square bracket where you should have put a greater than, or you've put a square bracket where you should have put a normal bracket, or you've put only one square bracket and you should have put two, something like that. So get into the habit of sort of doing a close reading, of going, well, does that say print, or is it just have I missed out a character or something like that? Try and get into that. Try and get into the mentality that you would have if you were reading some text, but you weren't reading it for fun or to learn. You were actually looking for typos. Is a good way to think about it. Number 9. If you're having trouble narrowing down where the problem is, sometimes it helps to cut half of the code that you think might be the problem, let's say, paste it into a new page so you can get it back, leave a gap so that you know where that text is meant to go, and that's important, and then run the program again. If you run the program again and you don't get the error, and if you run it a couple of times and you don't get the error, well, it's likely that the error is in the code that you temporarily moved out. If you run the program and you do get the same error, well, that shows that the bit that you've cut out isn't the problem. So you can put that back, and then you've narrowed it down to the other half, and then maybe you can delete sort of half of that, and you can narrow it down that way. Now, of course, I don't mean cut exactly half, because then you just create a new error. You need to cut sort of, you might have an if and then an end if, and you could sort of cut everything between the if and the end if. And that way you won't create a new error caused by starting some structure and not finishing it. So cut a sort of logical chunk out and see what happens. And that can be a good way to narrow down where the problem is, which of course is only half of the problem. The other problem sometimes is knowing what to change once you work out where the problem is. But if your problem is sort of finding the error, then that can be a helpful way to do it. However, bear in mind that the part of the code where the error occurs might not be the bit you have to change. So for example, let's say you want to define an array, but you don't define the array properly. You might get an error where the code is trying to use that array rather than where you set it up. So you might be looking at this and going, I can't work out, it's trying to use this array and I can't work out what's wrong with the format of what I've said. And the answer might be that there's nothing wrong with the format of what you've said. It's that you haven't set up the array properly in the first place. So sort of bear that in mind. And finally, number 10, you can put in code that is just for testing and is there to let you know where the program is going. So what I mean by that is you might have a line that says print the character A, capital A, let's say, and then later on you might have you might put in print B, and then print C and print D and etc. And then you can run the program, and if it prints A, B, and C, but not D, well, you know that okay, it's getting past the A point, it's getting past the B point, it's getting past the C point, but for some reason it's not getting to the D point, for example. And again, that can help you narrow down where the error is. All right, so I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you. If you don't think that I've been clear on anything, please leave a comment. I will probably be able to answer it quite quickly because this is quite a small channel, so I'm usually able to answer every comment that I get. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.